WOD Pod. Join me as I sit down with CrossFitters, fitness experts, top coaches, professional athletes, and other well-known gym goers to listen to their journey through fitness. Elise has competed in major UK CrossFit competitions as well as international ones too. As one of the youngest doctors in the UK, she's a great example of someone who manages to still make time to train hard whilst managing a very busy schedule. As well as being a junior doctor, Elise also does coaching at a gym and online coaching with athletes in whatever spare time she has available. I'm sure there's something we can all take away from listening to this episode. Enjoy. Series 2, Episode 4. Elise, thanks for jumping on the podcast.
No
Took
worries.
a while to get you on. Down in London, in this little gym. You live in London now?
Yeah, big move.
How is the London life?
I love it. I'm quite happy to be out of Birmingham. I kind of got a little bit bored of it. And I don't think you can get bored of London because there's so much of it.
Yeah. Did you live in Birmingham your whole life, or
No, just 5 years. So I grew up in Surrey in various different areas. So I lived in Guildford for most of that, where my mum still lives, and then moved up to Birmingham for uni. And then, after that, London. So
take me back to the days before CrossFit. Like, what sports did you play? What did you do before?
So I wasn't sporty at all as a kid. So until I was about 13, 14, didn't do anything. It was just a massive bookworm, basically. Still am a big nerd.
Yeah.
But then...
At least you own that.
I know. I should be wearing my glasses, really.
Yeah.
So my mum wanted to play tennis, and I had to go watch her, basically, after school. And I was like, you know what, let me try it. And then started it, really liked it, ended up being quite good at it. Played and used to go on camps to Barcelona in like my Easter holidays and stuff, so I got fairly good at that. And that's kind of how I got into it. But I kind of got put off sport still. I've got something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder where I have too much collagen, so I'm quite flexible but not necessarily the most like powerful person. So we only found out that when I was 10 or 11 because we went skiing and I basically injured myself because of it. Went to see these like doctors about it, and I like remember vividly one of them saying, you're like a rubber band with no spring. You'll never be good at running. You'll never be good at sport. So I still always had that like in the back of my mind.
So that probably put you off sport, thinking, well, there's no point me trying to be good at it.
I'd never be good at
get
it. Yeah, and I used to race go-karts, was like pretty much the only thing I did because me and my dad bonded over that. We used to watch Formula 1 together all the time.
Are you still a big F1 fan?
Ish. I think...
Not as much.
It's kind of tainted for me now because we're a bit estranged, so...
Okay.
But yeah, so race go-karts, played tennis, and then I started my secondary school, so that's year 7. You're like, 12?
12
11,
onwards.
12, yeah. So, new school and everything, so decided to try a new sport. Tried hockey, because that's what my mum played when she was at school.
Yep.
And ended up liking that. Played midfield and forward because I was small and fairly quick at the time. Also started swimming as well for a club. So my week ended up looking like pretty much
hockey,
every day. Hockey, swimming, tennis, most days, sometimes both. And then I kind of got known as being sporty, which was a very strange transition from being like the nerdy one in primary school to being quite sporty in secondary school.
Were you good at the sports as well? Because it's all right being sporty, but if you're not that good at them, then it kind of doesn't count.
I think I was one of those like jack of all trades, master of none. I didn't necessarily excel at any of them. Like tennis I was pretty good at, but I didn't necessarily enjoy that much because I was never very competitive individually. Now that's different, but I got more competitive on a team, which is why I enjoyed hockey more. Yeah. So kind of focused my energy towards hockey. Tennis kind of fell off a little bit. I ended up giving it up. Yeah. Tried to run more. That always didn't go well because of like my hip problems and stuff.
Is it curable or is it just always going to be a thing?
Always a thing. Yeah. Okay. So I think the most important thing that's been for that is building muscle and gaining weight, basically, because I was tiny as a kid, like teeny tiny, which is no wonder that like my joints weren't very stable anyway. So, yeah.
So to add to the joint stability, it's more putting muscle around it.
Yeah, so like just to stabilize my joints, because my ligaments and my tendons are very like loose, basically.
Right. Okay.
So played hockey, still did that at uni, used to play for my uni, and then started doing like S&C stuff for hockey.
Yep.
So was in the gym, but not focused towards anything in particular. And then COVID happened, and I was kind of like, well, I can't play hockey because that involves being around people. I started trail running, which is like one of my great loves. I think like it just makes me very happy, and where I live at home, where my mum lives, is just stunning. So like I'd go out on a Sunday and run for like 3-4 hours by myself, and just. I
think with running, if your environment and scenery is a lot nicer, you're more likely to do it. Yeah. If you're running around the streets of London, it's like tedious. I think road running.
No, that's so. Do you disagree? Because I think Birmingham was so bad that I hated running in Birmingham. There was nowhere nice to run. Like you could run along the canal, and that was about it. Yeah. And then London, like I can go to the Heath, I can go to Alexandra Palace. Like I live north, so like I'm right between Alexandra Palace, Highgate Wood, Hampstead Heath.
Okay.
I can go like to Regent's Canal if I want a long run. I can get the train into Central, run along the river. Like there's options. Whereas Birmingham, it was just
wherever you run, it's just a bit
and
bit shit.
It's also like it was not safe running in Birmingham when it was dark at all. And obviously there are parts of London that aren't. Like where I work in Tottenham, I've never run to and from work for that very reason. Yeah. But I think London, the scenery is better.
Yeah. Okay, so school life, did you enjoy school?
I did. It's funny, I enjoyed it, but I used to skive a lot.
Yeah.
I enjoyed art. That was kind of my big thing. I wasn't really into like any other subjects as much, but I was one of those people that kind of could get away with it.
Yeah.
Did pretty well at GCSEs. My only one that like was maybe not going to do well in was English. I ended up like pulling out the back, so it was fine.
Yeah.
And then I changed schools for sixth form from a school in an area that I'd lived in for like 10 years-ish. And still lived in the same area, but went to a school that was quite far away. So I ended up commuting really long periods of time, getting the train a lot, which meant that like I'd be going to school early, like getting the train at 6 a.m. and then not getting home until 8 because I'd go play hockey and then have to go from the pitches to then the train station and get the train home. And I just didn't like it. Like I didn't enjoy it there at all.
That was A-levels, GCSEs,
yeah, A-levels.
What did you do at A-level?
Maths, chemistry, biology, and then I did an AS in art. Well, we didn't have ASs, so I did 2 AS level.
Yeah.
And then I did an extra module in mechanics as well.
So that kind of leads on to your career now. When did you decide you were going to be a doctor?
Very late.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do at all.
Okay.
Which I think is unusual for people who do medicine, because usually they're very like driven and
or they know from the start.
Have done medicine, like it's in the family and things. And my mum's a management consultant, and my stepdad's in insurance. And my stepdad didn't go to uni, and my mum went to Bristol Polytech and did like linguistics. And she's very smart, just in a very different way to me. Like she can speak many different languages and like is very people smart. So I don't know where the science came from. But then
probably all the books you read.
Probably. And then I just ended up being good at maths. But I knew I didn't want to go to uni and do maths. I was like, that sounds really boring.
Yeah.
Toyed with the idea of neuroscience, toyed with just joining the army and not doing it all together.
Yeah.
And then someone was like, well, why don't you do medicine? And I was like, it seems like a lot of effort. Ended up applying for it and then interviewing at 4 different universities and then got into Birmingham. And
so how old? So this is 18, 19?
Yeah, 18-year-old me.
Like almost a last minute decision.
Yeah, pretty much. There was, to be fair, one good thing about that school was that there was a lot of like help to get into those kind of universities. So they encouraged me to apply to like Oxbridge and do all of those kind of things. They would like there wasn't like a club, but like they selected people that they
Sure.
would focus more effort on to try and help with interview prep and things.
Yeah.
And there was a lady there who I believe now has left, but she helped specifically people who wanted to get into like vet, dentistry, medicine.
Yeah.
Because there's extra exams and extra interviews you have to do, and it's, I think most schools that in that area, like I was on a bursary there, but it was a private school that was quite like,
yeah.
So they did a lot of help, and I do think that was really good and helped a lot with the interviews, and my personal statement was like pretty good.
Yep.
But yeah, so and then I got in and I was like, oh, guess that's what I'm doing now.
You're doing that now.
Yeah.
What's the process like, timeline? Is it 7 years?
5 or 6.
Okay. And how far are you through?
Oh, as in like...
To go from the beginning to qualifying as a doctor?
Yeah, 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
So I'm qualified now.
Yep.
But I won't be a consultant.
Official, yeah.
It's like I'm an official doctor, but I'm a junior doctor.
Okay.
But anyone who's not a consultant is a junior doctor, which I think is something in the media at the moment that's very like wish-washy.
Yeah.
So you can be a junior doctor for like 15 years and maybe not get a consultancy post. It's just very, very depends on the specialty. That if you do GP, you can be a consultant in 5 after med school, and then you're no longer a junior doctor. But something more complex like neurosurgery or pediatrics, it might take 10 to 15 years. So.
And how far are you off from being a consultant, or is that like
a long way?
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm in finishing my first, or halfway through my first year.
Yep.
After. So your first 2 years you do rotations where you do like medicine, surgery, and you'll do a community job as well. And that's kind of to give you a broader idea of like what different things are like, and also to make sure that if you were to come into contact with anything when you are qualified, like when you are specializing, that you could deal with quite a few different situations, even though you're specializing into one thing.
Yeah.
So my first job was in trauma and orthopedics, which is a surgical specialty. You see a lot of, it's mostly broken bones, but you see lacerations, you see infections, you see lots of different things. And then my job now is acute medicine, so I'm in and out of ED or A&E, as most people know it, and also an AMU, which is kind of the first place you would go after A&E.
Yeah.
And we see pretty much every single medical patient that gets admitted to the hospital.
What traits would you say, or attributes you need to be a doctor? Like, are there some doctors that don't have you think they shouldn't be a doctor because?
Yeah.
Okay, what are they lacking then?
I think some people lack compassion and selflessness, because the thing is, you do have to give up. You have to give up kind of like you in a way, because even when you're not at work, you're at work, because if anything happens, you're responsible because of the way you're trained.
Yeah.
So like me and my partner went on holiday, and on the plane someone had a seizure on the way there, and I then had to go and help because like morally that's what you do.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some people I know that maybe wouldn't have bothered, and I personally don't think that's right. I think that if you're trained to do something, you should help.
You should carry that out in every scenario.
Yeah.
Not pick and choose or like...
Exactly. Like, and it makes the job very hard, because when you leave work, you don't really, and you're always worried about patients.
Yeah.
And it often means you don't leave work on time, because you can't just leave in the middle of dealing with something.
So that's probably a negative side of the job.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, in a way, yes. It can be frustrating because you can't plan life, and life just happens.
What would you say is a big positive of doing the job?
I love it because I get to help people, and people can be so grateful. And that's really nice when people are.
Do you think there are a lot of people that aren't grateful?
Yeah, I mean, I was working over New Year's and in A&E, and I had 2 women come up to me and ask me to prescribe eye drops for their mum. And they started screaming at me because I didn't know who their mum was, because I wasn't looking after her. And they didn't know what type of eye drops they wanted, and it wasn't on the system, so I had no idea what I was supposed to be prescribing. Yeah. And you can't just
guess. You can't
like, if that's not right.
Yeah.
And most people would get that, and I understand that obviously if you're in A&E and your family member is unwell, you're stressed.
Yeah.
So you're going to react slightly differently to how you're going to be less reasonable.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not fair to take it out on the people who are trying to help. And also, their mum was really unwell. Those eye drops aren't going to make a difference right now.
No.
She's like, I looked at her notes, she's very unwell. And having eye drops to make sure that her eyes don't dry out is not her main priority.
No.
Right now. So I think sometimes if you go into hospital, you need to bear in mind the environment you're in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's the thing. There are always people in a worse situation than you. So
yeah, you can always guarantee that in A&E there is someone that is worse off than you. And when you start screaming at like nurses or doctors because you've been there a long time, it's not because we're not busy. It's not because we can't be bothered.
No.
It's because like we're overrun.
Yeah.
And you see that everywhere because like there's no beds in hospital. They're constantly in crisis, which means because there's no beds, they can't move people out of A&E, which means that we can't see more people, which means the ambulances get stuck because they can't hand over their patients to the hospital. So they can't go out to see people who are calling 999. So the whole system is kind of broken at the moment.
Have you come across anyone else with your condition that you've kind of been able to relate to?
I actually have, but not through my career, actually through CrossFit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went and did, there's a brand called Remain Untamed who do clothes, and I went and did like a little shoot for them. Have you heard of them? They're kind of local to Surrey. They're at Arnold's actually.
Were they? Is it like a female only thing?
Yeah.
And they did. Was there a comp that they did just for? Was there a comp?
They did a Remain. Yeah.
It was like a girls.
Games.
Yeah, but was it just females?
I think it was.
I'm pretty sure it is that. Maybe.
Yeah. But I met someone who also was doing, like modelling for them.
Yeah.
Who also has Ehlers-Danlos loss, and she's posted about it before, and that was really nice for me to like meet someone who also suffers.
Especially in the CrossFit industry as well.
Yeah, so, I was like, oh, someone else can do it too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so coming on to CrossFit then, when did you first, so let's go back to finishing school.
Yeah.
Doing sport. When did you first come across CrossFit and discover it?
So it was lockdown.
Yeah.
And I went back to my mum's to live for, I think it was 3 or 4 months. I was working in 24-hour care. So I was looking after these disabled ladies who needed 24-hour care. So I was working 3 days on, so I'd live in their house for 3 days and do everything for them. And then I'd live at home for 3 days and then I'd go back because in COVID, a lot of people couldn't work. Or
sure. Yeah.
People who were vulnerable then couldn't go to the jobs and things. So there was a lot of like filling in that needed doing.
Yep.
And Birmingham Uni were basically like, if you don't find a job at home, come back and we have jobs for you. So yeah, and because they'd cancelled our exams, so kind of fair, I guess.
Yeah.
And I had 2 15-kilo dumbbells and a rowing machine at home. And I was like, well, what can I do with this? And then I started like looking up workouts, and then you kind of...
Before you know it, you've discovered it. And
yeah, it's a snowball effect, isn't it? So yeah. Okay,
and so obviously like CrossFit's known for varied workouts. And I think that's where people... You only had a row and two dumbbells, but the amount of different workouts you could do with that demonstrates how varied it can be. Like a lot of stuff's body weight, or your gymnastics, your lifting side. So like coming out of lockdown, how do you kind of prepare for comps? How do you like incorporate that, knowing that there's so much variety? Because it's not like, so for instance, high rocks.
Yeah,
you can just train for a specific task, which a lot of people dislike, a lot of people like. Obviously you're into CrossFit now, so it's like there is so much you can try and be good at. How do you train for that?
I think I came out of lockdown being very, very fit. Like great endurance side of things, because I used to obviously run for like hours and hours, and then the workouts I was doing was basically me beasting myself with a dumbbell and a rower. Lots of burpees, lots of bodyweight things. I wasn't really doing anything except working, walking, running and training, because there wasn't anything to do. So I lost a lot of weight for me. I was really tiny at the time. I was probably 10 to 15 kilos lighter than I am now, which is quite significant for my size. And not necessarily the healthiest mindset-wise that I've ever been. So I knew in the back of my mind I needed to work on strength and probably needed to cut the cardio back.
Yep.
And also eat more. But it's difficult sometimes to make that change when society tells you like small is good, and people are like, oh, you look great and stuff. So that was difficult. And
also like doing a lot of gymnastic stuff, like pull-ups. Suddenly when you add a little bit of weight, and it's like suddenly you feel a lot heavier on the bar.
Even burpees.
Like, everything it just feels a lot heavier and slower.
Yeah.
But then you're never going to be that all-round athlete unless you're good at the strength side. Yeah,
like, and I've always been known as like the small one. Like everyone has always said like, oh, you're the small girl, and like that was what I was. I was known for being really fit, but like small and not that strong, and like kind of identified with that for a long time.
So I imagine that's probably been a big mental battle to be like, in order to get stronger, I need to kind of gain some weight, but then also need to maintain my fitness. Yeah,
and I have said to people before, like, me now, I probably can't beat myself in a burpee workout like me how many years ago. Like, I probably can't. Because I'm heavier now and I can't move as quickly. And that's a sacrifice that I'm just going to have to make.
As an all-round athlete, you'd be better.
Yeah, but like overall, like if you tested me on like lots of different things, I'd be much better. Like my snatch is like 20 or 30 kilos heavier, my clean and jerk's 20 or 30 kilos heavier. I've got more gymnastics, I'm much stronger, my like muscular endurance is better. I would even say like I'm probably better on machines because I've got more power endurance than just like basically like aerobic endurance. So, and I'm better lactate wise as well. So like even sprint stuff I'm now better at, whereas before I was pretty much like I could beat anyone in a workout over 20 minutes, but if it was less than, there's probably people who could sprint better than I could. So,
and actually, as comps have multiple categories, they try and cram as much into a day. Workouts tend to be less than 10 minutes.
Or to be like 12, 7 minutes.
Anything less than 10 minutes, which doesn't play into your advantage really. No. Unless you go into the CrossFit Games where they have 5 days to do a competition, you can easily incorporate 30-minute workouts.
Yeah, and I mean, that shows in previous comps I've done, like Arnold's. When was that? It was like a year and a half ago, maybe more.
Jamie, when was Arnold's?
September the year before.
Yeah, so September 22.
Yeah, so like almost a year and a half ago. And at that comp, I placed 10th overall, and I came second and fourth, and some like I think top 10 another workout, and then the lifting workout I came like last. So like. It just shows. And even Ragnarok that I did last summer, I came first, second, first again, and then like maybe another second or something like that. And then they double scored the lifting workout, which meant I then came third overall. I did really well in the lifting. Like I think I came top 10 in the snatch complex, which for me is really good. Clean and jerk, not as good, but there's whatever.
You also get athletes that are the other scale to you where they're like, super strong in lifting, but anything over 10 minutes in terms of cardio, they're absolutely done. So you know your strengths. Win those workouts.
I'm never going to win a strength workout. Like realistically, I'm just not. But the more I can mitigate how many points I lose in a strength workout, the better.
Talk me through a typical week now of training. We'll come on to your coaching, but talk me through like how you balance your job as a doctor and training for CrossFit.
A typical week is different every week because I work on a rota.
Okay.
So it's near impossible to say that most weeks I do this. But practically every Monday I coach and I work in the gym so I can train. Tuesdays, most of the time, as long as my race coordinator has got it right, I have off. So I might have like a few hours of PT, and then I have most of the day to like train, see my boyfriend, see my friends. And then I tend to work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Those can be long days or short days. So I might be on call for 13 hours, or I might be on a short day, which is 10 hours, usually 8 till 5 or so on, like roughly. And then I might work a Saturday, Sunday. If I am, it'll be 13 hours both days. Or I'll have the Saturday off, and then the Sunday I'll be in the gym working for like 4.5 hours.
So you could have scenarios where you're working like 5 days in a row, of which they're 13 hours.
I've worked 10 in a row. before.
So on those days, how do you not train?
No, it's too hard.
Okay. Have you tried to do that?
Yeah.
You tried to finish a 13-hour shift and go to the gym, and you're just like, nah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually, you can do it before-ish, like not a massive session. Like, obviously I can't fit in like lifting and a workout and conditioning and like everything. But I've done, so like, for example, over New Year's, I worked standard days, 27th, 28th, had 29th off. Then 30th, 31st, 1st, I was on calls that whole time. So I was 13 to 14 hours back to back, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So the Saturday, I think I did a 40-minute EMOM. The Sunday, I did a 12K run around where I live. And then the Monday, I took completely off, which for me is pretty good. Usually I wouldn't train that much on calls, but I knew because it was 3 days back to back, I kind of wanted to do something.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, when I say I went for a run, my average heart was like 130, like it was very chilled, because I know that if I beast myself, I get to work and then I feel too tired. And then I know that it affects how I can relate to people, and like it's much more difficult. And you're on your feet a lot as well, so you don't want to weigh yourself out that much.
Sure. I'd say it's quite refreshing that a doctor is like physically really fit.
Yeah.
Would you say that you're in the minority? So like, when you look at the other doctors you work alongside that are doing 13-hour shifts, do any of them go to the gym, or is it like, do a few?
I think a few run, like there's quite a few like runners or triathletes, purely because I think when you spend most of your day inside, you want to get out. I found that a lot, especially in the summer. I didn't want to spend 10 hours at work and then go to the gym and be inside. I wanted to go for a run and be outside, which unfortunately for me does not play to where I need to be working. I need to be in the gym and strength training, but that was just what I was craving at the time. And I think that happens for a lot of people. Like, I've got one of my best friends, she is a doctor. She was massively into CrossFit and is now like doing marathon training and stuff. Yep. Because you do kind of shift to whatever you just are enjoying at the time.
I think that's the secret. I think you're only going to stay consistent with something if you actually enjoy doing it.
Yeah, so true.
What would you say to the people that have equally as busy day jobs but just say that they don't quite have enough time to train?
You can make time. Like, most of the time, so if I am on a standard day, I'll get up at 5. I will have like a bagel or something to eat, and then I'll leave straight away, go train for an hour, then go to work. Then I'll leave at between 5 and 6, hopefully, as long as I finish on time.
Yeah.
I'll be at the gym by like 6, train for another hour and a half, and then get home at like maybe 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I'm out the house from like 5:30 until 8 p.m.
Yeah, and you've got 2 sessions in, so.
And I do that back to back, and yeah, it's really tiring. And yeah, my sleep sometimes suffers, but if you want to make time for something and you have goals, you will make time.
Yeah. So to add into the mix, you're also doing coaching.
Yeah.
How do you manage to include like being a coach for Brick by Brick?
Well, yeah, and CrossFit North London as well. So I'm actually 70% part-time at work, like as a doctor, which is 32 and a half hours-ish a week. Some weeks that's 65 hours, some weeks that's none. It's obviously because it's a rota, it's
so an average,
and obviously 32 and a half hours for most people is a full-time job, but it's just that if I was to work full-time, that would be 48 hours a week, which is the maximum you can work in Europe without having to sign a contract saying that you're not. So 32 and a half hours a week average at medicine, and then I do Mondays in the gym, so I coach in the morning and the evening. I do PT hours on top of that sometimes, so I have some great PT clients, and then I do programming for Brick by Brick, which I love. I find it so interesting. I almost treat it like a bit of science. I've even had people be like, it's interesting because you're a doctor, you take very technical, and I was like, it's a bit of a compliment actually.
But I think coaching is a science, because I think it's not like, I think there's a strategy to coaching people.
Yeah, and you're constantly learning as well.
Yeah, I think so. And you often see that coaches don't do it with much like science behind it, and you can see like, are you just completely blagging this? And I think a lot of coaches do.
Is when I see, it's my pet peeve when I see like coaches turn up late, and then they're like, they'll be like, okay, hop on a machine for a bit, and then they're like, okay, do these stretches, and then they're like, okay, warm up, this movement, this movement, this movement, and they're like, 3, 2, 1, go. And like, there's no like, here's a strategy, or like, here's a good way to do this movement, or here's something you could try different this time, because like that's how you should be. Like training is for trying new things, right? So like someone might always scale to ring rows for pull-ups, but what if you gave them a different scale and then in a few weeks they could do pull-ups? Like that's how you should be aiming to do it. It shouldn't be that you just every time I do Cindy, I do ring rows instead of pull-ups. I do banded push-ups or push-ups on a box, and then I do air squats to a med ball because I'm not quite sure where my depth is. It should be like, okay, let's try something different every time.
And I think coaches know that. I think a lot of them are just lazy. And I think they just kind of think it's just easy for me to just set them off on the same thing.
And some people are coaches only because they want the lifestyle. They're not coaches because they like to coach.
Definitely, yeah.
So,
is the goal always to be a doctor? Or if you had to pick between the two, would it be would you go down the doctor's route, or is it hard?
It's hard to know. I think if I lived outside of London, which I don't think I'd want to, but if I did, I could probably afford to go part-time as a doctor and not coach, maybe, depending on where I lived. If I lived more north, probably. If I lived south, probably not. In which case, I probably would stick with just medicine because I love it. But I think that full-time would be too much for me. I think mentally it would be too challenging.
Especially if you're trying to be an athlete and train yourself.
Yeah, but even without.
Okay.
I think it's a very intense job. I think most of my friends from work have had some episode of burnout so far. And we've all been doctors for, like 9 months?
Yeah.
And we're all like...
feeling it.
Yeah, and like every time there's strikes, everyone's like, yes, thank God I need that break. But like you shouldn't feel like that.
No.
Like we shouldn't be like waiting for a week off to then like go again. And it's just because the rota is so intense. Like if you're working on calls, you get up, you go to work, you get home, you pack your bag for the next day, you go to sleep, and then you repeat. Like there's no
downtime. It's just
there's no like half hour to sit and just like relax.
Yeah.
There's no like debrief time. Like especially I think like if you don't have time to then like talk to someone about your day, especially if it's been really intense, if you've been in A&E, if there's been a crash call, if something's, because that's generally what happens when you're on call. You have a bleep and you could be called to a crash call or a trauma call, and that could be someone really unwell. And I've had it before where I had someone really unwell, I had to leave the crash call to go see another unwell patient, and then I didn't get to debrief with my crash call team, and then I had to go to handover. I left work late, I got home at like 10:30, my flatmates were asleep, my boyfriend was asleep, I couldn't talk to anyone about my day, and I had to do the same thing again, and I knew that I had to be at work less than 12 hours after I left, and I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to do it tomorrow again. I was like, I physically don't know if I can.
You're almost carrying yesterday's issues into the next day. If you can talk about it, you kind of like offload a lot of your stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you're going into the next day just not like, feeling fresh with all that going on in your mind.
And all you can think as well is that like maybe it'll happen again. Like maybe there'll be another crash call.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a really like unwell patient again, and I have to do that again.
Yeah.
And there might be someone who dies. Like all these things go through your head, and you're like, if that happens again, I don't know if I can hold myself together.
Yeah.
Because that's so intense to go through, especially when you're like young. Like I'm the youngest you can be and be a doctor. A lot of my friends are like a few years older because they've done like various other degrees or like something else. And even then, like obviously it's still very intense, but I think there's something to be said for like, if you're in your 30s, maybe you've maybe got more emotional maturity and more strategies to deal with that.
Yeah.
Like I'm only 23 and already I have to deal with like on my first rotation, we had like 5 or 6 patients die. And that's horrible. Like, that's not nice at all.
Do you think going to the gym helps like offload a lot of that?
Yeah.
Like when you train, you're like, it's like relieving stress in a weird way, or like
I agree.
Offloading a lot of mental issues.
I think you have to be careful because I think there can be an unhealthy way of using the gym. I think you can get to a point where if it's your only coping mechanism, then you end up not taking rest days and you don't recover, and then you're beating yourself into the ground, which is not healthy either. But I think you can use it as a way of like walking into the gym, leaving the day behind, as long as you do leave the day behind, and then just like getting a good workout in, feeling like you've done something productive for that day. Because if you necessarily don't feel like work's gone particularly well, it's important to have something that you've been like, okay, like
at least that went well.
I've done something good.
Yeah.
I think my only problem with that is that for me, the things that help me do that are not necessarily the things I need to be working on. So like squatting really heavy is not something that I necessarily go into the gym and walk out and be like, great.
And also, you want to do the things which you know you're good at, because then you do feel like you've achieved it.
Yeah,
whether if you're doing something that you feel like I'm quite weak or I don't like that movement and you do it, you don't feel like you've actually had a good workout. Even though
it depends.
Working on your like negatives are what you should be doing, so you should feel good for doing that.
It depends. For me, like, I personally am not very good at thrusters. I'm quite long-limbed. I have very long legs. They're just not a good movement for me. And chest to bar are a skill that, like, I'm still working on personally. I would like to be able to do bigger unbroken sets of butterfly chest to bar. And I think most women struggle with that as a movement. But if I went to the gym, did a really sweaty workout with, like, thrusters and butterfly chest to bar, I would feel good about that.
Yeah.
But it's more for me, like, if I go in and do ring muscle up drills for an hour, I'm going to walk out being like, oh, that was horrible. I still can't do a ring muscle up.
Yep.
Shit, like, sorry, I probably shouldn't swear.
No, it's fine. But like, what, you come out feeling like, was that worth my time?
Yeah.
I still can't do them. So was that an hour wasted?
And you're just like, oh, like, that didn't make me feel better at all.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you said, like, getting in, getting sweat on, and then walking out and being like, yeah, cool.
Often helps.
Yeah.
Okay, so plans for the 2024 CrossFit season.
Yeah.
Have you got any comps lined up?
So I'm doing, obviously, the Open.
Yep.
I'm doing SID Origins with Arc Athletics Club.
That's cool.
Should be really fun. That's in Bath.
Yeah.
It's a weekend before my birthday. So.
Nice.
24th birthday for me.
Yep.
And then, it has swimming in it, so I'm excited. And a run.
Finally, all the swimming's paid off.
I know. I can't wait. And then I'm doing the None, whatever it's called, games.
Oh, okay, yeah.
In Wellingborough.
Yep.
With my boyfriend, one of the girls from our gym, Fen, and we need to find another male. But yeah, team of 4 just for like some fun.
Yep.
And then hopefully I'll find time for one other one at some point. It's more just because I only get 6 days of leave per rotation. I kind of have to be careful how I book it, and I can't book on calls off. So I can only book standard days. So for me to get like a decent amount of time off, it relies on me having 3 standard days back to back. And also I have to book it off 6 weeks in advance, and most comps won't tell you that you've qualified 6 weeks in advance. So
you've almost got to chance it and be like, I'm confident I'm going to qualify.
Yeah. So like we were saying earlier, like I qualified for WOD Barcelona in Barcelona last year in September, but I happened to be working and they only told me 2 weeks before. And there was no way I was going to get my rota coordinator to move my leave days around by then. So, and I'd booked a holiday in my leave, so I couldn't have changed it. So, and I'm not going to book flights and things. So,
a comp you should do at some point is WOD on the Lock.
Yeah,
because
I want to.
Open water swimming.
Yeah.
And we were talking earlier off camera about your open water swimming.
Yeah.
So I feel like you'd be quite good at that.
I think so, and I think because it's got like trail running and like outdoorsy stuff.
Yeah, trail running, and the first workout was a 5K, of which it was 2K to the lock and then swim across the lock. But you had to come, like, it was quite shallow at parts, so you were like out the water, in the water, out the water, in the water, and some people didn't even make it across.
Really?
Just because it was so cold.
That.
But I feel like you'd be quite good at that.
Yeah, that's like right up my street.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would like to do that, definitely. And also because it's Scotland, I could tie it in with going to see my brother and my stepsister, which would be great.
There you go.
And it's not, I don't have to fly.
No.
Get the train.
Get the train.
Yeah.
Still time.
When is it?
July the 20th.
Well, I won't find out my route in April. I can figure out whether
April,
I can do it or not.
The qualifiers will probably be out around then, so you could at least do the qualifiers anyway, and then if you get in, you're in.
Okay, noted.
Biggest CrossFit achievement to date? Podium?
I've had a few podiums actually, haven't I? 3rd at Ragnarok. What else have I done? Won my Rainhill category, which was my first ever competition. That was cool.
Yep.
No, one or came second. I can't remember. Something.
Yeah.
And podiumed at something else. But I think actually doing Oslo with Joe was probably my best, because it was the most competitive environment I've been in.
And the level of athletes.
Yeah, and like it was mad. Like, Kristen Holter was watching at the end of my lane. I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, how is this happening?
Yeah, like I met her just before, and like she stood at the end of my lane whilst I came 12th in that workout, which like in a field of 40 plus like elite athletes was
really
like,
good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And that's funny because that even is like over a year ago, and I'm like, God, I'd smash me now.
Yeah.
Like, or me then, I would.
I feel like if you're looking back a year ago and you feel like you'd dominate you a year ago, you obviously had a good year of training.
Yeah, it's funny because like sometimes I'm like, oh, have I even like improved that
Yeah,
much?
like where am I better? But then you've got to think. If
part
you
of me
can
wants to
feel
retest
like that,
them and like see how much better I would do. Because like I remember there was a workout, it was like 3-minute cap. It was 36 chest to bar, and then like really heavy, well, not really heavy, but like heavyish snatches, like 6 snatches at 47.5, and then 3 at 60 or something. And back then, like 47.5 was like 2.5 kilos off my max snatch. And 36 chest to bar was like a lot for me.
Yeah.
I didn't get through the chest to bar because I was still kipping chest to bar then. Like, I wasn't even doing, and I was doing like sets of like 3 and 4 because I was rubbish at chest to bar. And like I remember Joe went unbroken on the chest to bar.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was just like, God, this is, and I think I came like second last in that workout, which is fine. It just gave me things to work on.
Yep, exactly. It points out your weaknesses.
Now I'd be able to do the workout, which I mean, it's a 3-minute cap, so tight, but at least would get through the chest to bar and onto the snatches, which is a big improvement from then. Huge. Yeah, so got to take the wins.
Which brands in the CrossFit industry would you love to work with?
Ooh. I was talking to someone about this the other day because we were saying, like, would you rather work with WIT because they stock everyone, Nike, Noble, who else? Like, I can't
Reebok.
Even think Reebok. Who else is there?
Rad.
I love Rad though.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I've gone to like their events and helped out and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Because they're local and used to train at one of the gyms my boyfriend works at. So have been and like helped out at their events, and their team is just amazing. Yeah, like they're so friendly. They're really nice people.
Are you Team Rad or Met, like Night Metcon? What do you wear? Both.
Rad.
You wear Rads.
I don't have a pair of Metcons anymore. I wear Rads. I have their trainers, and I have their normal like Metconning shoes.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're both really good. Yeah.
Cool. Going to move on to some rapid fire questions to end the podcast. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Start again. Best max lift event you've done in a comp?
Snatch, hang snatch at Ragnarok.
At Ragnarok?
Yeah.
Your number one accessory when doing active recovery?
Accessory when doing active recovery?
So like, what do you use? Foam rolls, lacrosse balls, massage gun? Like, what's your go-to bit of equipment?
My boss, Jed, he does injury clinics because he's a neurokinetic rehabilitation therapist. And he's amazing. He sorted out my shoulder, so.
Favorite song when doing a max lift? What do you like if you're training on your own? What do you put on?
Uprising by Muse.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's your favorite flavor WOD fuel?
Oh, the strawberry kiwi. The
strawberry
OG.
kiwi. Yeah, it is the OG. It's just come back in as well. Just restocked. What's the best CrossFit box you've trained at? It can be abroad.
We went to one in Malta called CrossFit F15 in October, and they were just the friendliest people.
Yeah.
Like, they invited us to train with them like the next day, and like the owner did, and like it was just lovely. Like, the people were just amazing.
I feel like abroad, because we went to one in Bordeaux, I feel like they're just like, come on in. And I went to CrossFit Reebok in Paris. They didn't charge. They were just like
really?
Yeah, they just like get involved. And I feel like you'd never get that in the UK, would you? Like,
no, you walk in. I mean, like, I like WIT, but you walk in and like, I don't know.
It's a business.
Certain clientele. Yeah. So you don't walk in and everyone's like, yeah, cool, like, hi, but like, and like, I don't know. The one in Malta was less polished. Like, like kind of
bit rough and ready.
Yeah, like very much, and it's small, but it had all the equipment you need. Like, the people are super friendly, and I think that's what makes the difference. It's not like what they have; it's the people.
It's the people and the environment. Favorite takeaway?
Oh, I think Thai or Vietnamese. I like it. I love like Asian fusion food kind of thing.
To finish off the podcast, is there anything else you kind of want to mention? Like anything you want to say?
I think if you're struggling to fit in training around work, prioritize just getting in half an hour or going for a walk or cycle to work or do something. Just
move.
Yeah. And like I always cycle to work because then at least, even if I'm not training, I get like a 15-minute cycle there, a 15-minute cycle back. And like, what's that in the context of everything else? That's going to keep you healthier than if you weren't to do anything.
Yep.
When you sat down all day, probably. So, yeah.
What would be your best piece of advice to your younger self?
Probably don't stress and be so hard on yourself about everything. Like, I think my younger self I would just read into everything so much and like just sweat the little things.
Yep.
And like, it will work out. Like, it sounds stupid because how do you know? But it will.
Yeah.
Because you've landed on your feet so far. So what means that you won't in the future?
Yep.
Something might happen, but you should have confidence in yourself that you will figure it out as it happens.
Yep. So Pete, who was on the podcast before, asked a question for you. He said, what's the best fitness purchase you've made for under £100?
Ooh, I think most of my fitness purchases have been under £100, given I earn very little as a doctor.
I don't know, rads are more.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Best purchase under £100. I think grips, because they save your hands.
Yep.
Like, I think if you get a good pair of grips and they last, it just makes, like, you don't rip. And
have you tried the Sky Hill ones?
I haven't.
So I've got a pair. They're really good. Really? Like, I can't rate them enough. Some people like hate them. They say that they're really slippy, but nah, they're like game changers. They're really
like
long.
This kind of bar, right?
Yeah.
Like the really like varnished ones.
They like wrap right over the bar. Yeah. So they're really long.
See, but that's the whole thing with do you remember the CrossFit Games standards last time? It had to be like your palm.
So you'd be knackered then. But I don't plan on going to the CrossFit Games, so I'm fine. To finish off the podcast, Hybrid Academy have created these WOD Pod t-shirts. So here is your WOD Pod t-shirt to wear at your next comp.
Thank you.
Oversized, medium,
baggy
fit.
Perfect. Exactly what I like.
Socials, where can people find you?
So my Instagram is Elise_lifts, I think. I think that's pretty much the only social I really have. Yeah. And
people can just follow you regarding like training, see where you're at.
Life, doctor stuff. Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting for people to like see how you balance. So like I always think you're training so much, but maybe you're not. I don't know. Like you are, but I think you've got a lot going on as well.
It's like very like this because it's like if I have some time off, like we've been striking this week, so I've been able to train a lot.
Yep.
Like go to team training and things that I wouldn't usually, but when I'm working a lot, so over New Year's I didn't train for like 5 days.
Yeah.
So it's very dependent on when it is, and I think that's something that maybe is interesting to people, like how you can make sure you recover enough when you're doing higher volume sometimes and then lower other times.
Yep.
And then peaking again and then coming back down.
Yep.
So,
very good. I'm sure people will be interested. So thanks very much for joining me. Really good episode. I hope you enjoyed that episode and a huge thank you for listening. Make sure you're following the pod on Instagram at the.wod.pod. Our Twitter at @the_WOD_pod. The podcast is sponsored by WOD Powders. That's at WOD Powders on Instagram. Please show some support to the pod by either sharing this episode with a mate or buying some supplements from wodpowders.co.uk. See you guys next week.